The comments, opinions, and views shared during this program are of those individual Freemasons and do not reflect the official position of a Grand Lodge, concordant body, appendant body, Masonic Authority, or craftsmanonline.com. Welcome to the Craftsman Online Podcast, the only 5-star rated Masonic podcast endorsed by the Grand Lodge of New York.
Hey, it's Brother Michael Arce, co-founder of CraftsmanOnline.com, with our subscriber extra episode featuring Brother Angel Millar. And before we get into the beautiful bean footage that is the bonus time with Brother Angel, I have to say this. I have been immensely proud of my friend, our brother, Angel Millar, as he has progressed. I got on the Angel train a little late. He had already been an accomplished writer on several Masonic topics, and his book, The Path, the Warrior Mystic, was one that really touched me. We did a great episode with him a couple years ago, and that book was released. And it's been some time since he's come back on the podcast. What he's been doing since then, he is a busy guy. Aside from the speaking and being active at his lodge in Manhattan, Brother Angel has also taken on the mantle of being the editor-in-chief of the Fraternal Review magazine, which is a very special publication that comes out from the California Lodge of Research. So, without any further ado, I just want to, again, congratulate, give nothing but love for this guy, and thank him for the extra time that he's giving to you and me with this episode. I feel so much better prepared to have this conversation with you as some time has passed, and I've had an opportunity, and I hope brothers who have joined us as listeners or just folks that are interested in Freemasonry or just esotericism have enjoyed our podcast as well, as we've kind of explored some of these areas with other guests. We've gotten into alchemy, we've gotten into Stoicism, more of the Eastern and Western civilization and the deeper meanings of things, and really some of these connections. So I don't feel like I'm hanging out on the kiddie stair as much anymore when we get in these conversations.
Good.
But what's amazing, and I wanted to just point this out to our listener, is I'm a big fan of listening to the universe, and a brother here in DC sent me a link to a podcast that you were on where you talked about some of these other orders or societies. And I'm like, I know this guy. And we reached out to set up this interview, which just kind of coincides with the release of the Fraternal Review. So I'm really curious to find out why there are so many of the traditional or cultural rites of passage rituals of this initiation that seems to be based around the concept of dying in one life to be reborn in another.
Because you find this obviously in Freemasonry, and you find it in the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, and you find it in other rites. And you certainly find it going back into antiquity as well. Even among tribal shamans, as far as we can tell, there was this symbolism of dying and rebirth, and sometimes shamans would sort of decorate themselves as skeletons, for example. And, even among the Maasai, when the, boys become men and go through this rite of passage into manhood, and they're circumcised without any anesthetic, they will also paint their skin white, which seems to be indicative of a ghost or something deathly as well. But that's something not living anyway. Well, on the one hand, you might say symbolically, it's symbolic of a transformation of the consciousness, right, from a profane consciousness to the one that embodies or is able to perceive the sacred. Whatever that may be. It's important not to get stuck in symbolism, actually. We all like symbolism. I like symbolism a lot. But the problem with that is you're, in a sense, returning to a more basic or primitive type of consciousness. Why is there this sort of narrative of death and rebirth? I think leaving symbolism aside, when you contemplate your own death, your own mortality, it's a transformative experience, right? When you think, I could die tomorrow, I could die today, that makes you want to live your life in the best way possible and not waste it on trivial things. Whereas if you never think about your mortality, then you are perfectly happy to squander your life. And in the West, of course, we do not think about our mortality. As a century ago, certainly 2 centuries ago, family members, especially obviously grandparents that would have been living with parents and grandchildren, of course. Grandparents would have died at home. The children would have seen it. Parents would have seen it. And, if you go back even, well, to then and certainly before that, children would have died at home, and pretty frequently, actually. So everybody was used to death and dying. And, in a sense, one of the reasons why the West has become quite irreligious is because we no longer have a consciousness of our mortality, which is really, it's a basic, it's in a sense what makes us human, is to understand and be fully conscious that we're going to die. Animals don't really seem to know that they're going to die. They live every day as if it's forever. And human beings are different from animals in as much that we know that we're going to die. In the modern world, most people don't know that, or at least will put that out of their mind until the very last minute. And we only have to look around to see, people wasting their lives, or people being, mean to each other, or wasting their time, having no sense of direction. When you think about your impending death, you don't do that so much, if at all.
Well, the other side of that coin when it comes to ritual and initiation is there's also a bit of suffering. And it got me thinking about some of the work that you've done in your most recent book, The Path of the Warrior Mystic, where you talk about there's a certain amount of experience that we have to go through in life to really appreciate the fullness of life. Do you want to expand on that a little bit?
We can't avoid pain. We can probably avoid suffering, which is, a mental state, right? So let's say you cut your arm really badly. I mean, you can focus on the pain of that cut, or you can put your mind elsewhere. And, today I think it's very unfortunate that people are told constantly that they need to be protected from everything, including opinions they disagree with, which ultimately makes them very weak and unable to function in society, if not actually eventually quite dangerous. Dangerous to, law and order, for example. Pain is inherent in life. You're not going to experience a life without pain, without contradiction, without realizing that your opinions are limited, that you don't know as much as you think. That's a part of growing. It could be said that I had a really unlucky beginning to my life with lots of pretty extreme difficulties, and lived, a fair chunk of my life really on the edge. Honestly, when I look back at that, it was very unpleasant and stressful at the time, but it's the luckiest thing that ever happened to me, because, if I had got what I had wanted when I was young, I'd be bored. I wouldn't really be doing what I want to do after a while. I would be directionless. I would be content in some way, but I would never, live the life that I've lived. I would never have left England and emigrated to Canada for a while, and to America, and met all the people I've met that have been, fascinating, and done all the things that I've done. And it's not good luck that forces you to grow. It's, quote unquote, bad luck. But that often turns out to be the luckiest thing ever. So
I want to talk about that because, and let me know if I've got these characters confused. I don't want to offend anybody, but in your book, you detail the story of the Buddha, I believe.
Yeah.
Basically how he was a prince that lived in a castle that experienced no suffering, no pain, no want ever, had just it all rolled out for him. And as you're talking about this, I'm thinking of, unfortunately, modern parents today that are helicopter parents, or now they call them bulldozer parents for their kids. And as you touch on, they're missing all these experiences. But what's the lesson that we learned from the Buddha is that he walked away from the palace doors and lived a life of basically being a homeless person and being dependent on the help and aid of others. And just listening to your words, it got me thinking about a thought that I had while I was running a couple weeks ago, preparing for our talk, where I now look at setbacks that I have in life or experiences that wouldn't be positive. And instead of wondering, why is this happening to me, which is a natural human reaction, instead I ask, What am I supposed to be learning from this moment? Why is this? What is the thing I need to learn so that I can grow and heal as a person? And I think that touches to your point of suffering, that if we do live this life of never experiencing chaos, whether it's interesting people or experiences that happen in our lives, we never really know what life means.
When you think of the Buddha, as you say, the Buddha was surrounded by luxury and just sheltered from, all anything sort of negative at all, and surrounded by beautiful women and luxury and money. And he, according to the story anyway, the traditional story, he left all of that when he saw a sick person, an elderly person, and a dead body. So in a sense, what made him leave that, what was suffering or illness or the negative. And even if we leave aside religion completely and just look at it as an adventure, what set him on the adventure was everything bad. He could have just stayed and lived in luxury, and many people would have wanted to do that, right? Or most people. But he wanted to find something beyond that and beyond himself, and sort of push himself beyond his limits, whatever they may have been. And sure, you wouldn't have known what they were at the time.
When you were talking about Mesmer and his practice of mesmerization or mesmerizing folks, it got me thinking of the old HBO series, The Nick. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but it talked about how medicine was practiced in the early 20th century, where, experimental medicine was just gruesome. That they didn't really have, they barely knew about sterilization techniques. They had a very loose understanding of painkillers and what it took. They were inventing things and procedures basically on the spot. And I don't want to make light of this, but it was almost a form of entertainment as well, where other doctors or physicians would come in and observe this, and newspapers would report on it. So I'm just curious, when you talked about Mesmer and the baths and just the large amount of people that he was trying to heal or treat during his procedures, was there an audience there? Was there somebody recording what was being done? How do we have record of what was taking place?
Yeah, well, I don't think there was an audience, not as far as I'm aware. I could be wrong, but he treated probably thousands of people, so that there were plenty of people to describe the experience. And as I say, there are actually etchings of his seances as well, or sittings. So yeah, so we do kind of know what was going on,
okay,
to a certain degree anyway.
Yeah, and I was just because at that time, to see people acting that way, when we talk about the term magic, it would have been very difficult to explain if your knowledge base was basically what you had learned from the teachings of the Bible. You would go, oh, that person is possessed. You wouldn't understand the process like we do today when it comes to hypnotism.
Yeah. So you asked me about science earlier, and I was talking about how, in a sense, Freemasonry is a reaction, not necessarily against science, but against the stripping out of the mystery. But the attack on religion and this idea that everything could be solved by rationality. But it's curious in regard to Mesmer. Mesmer claimed that there was this invisible fluid around people, as I say, and that didn't seem to be far-fetched at the time, because not long before, of course, Sir Isaac Newton had discovered gravity, as you say, and so people understood that there were these invisible forces. Of course, people had always thought there had been invisible forces such as angels and spirits and demons, but now, in some sense, some science was discovering these invisible forces. So gravity was an invisible force. Electricity, which Benjamin Franklin had tried to harness, was an invisible force. And then later in the century, with the first hot air balloon being released into the air and carrying people for the first time, this was another invisible force. So when Mesmer, and that's not, I'm not saying anything original, that's been said before, but so when Mesmer said there's an invisible force around people that can be manipulated to heal them, this didn't actually sound unscientific. In fact, it actually sounded quite modern and progressive. So people didn't really need to look in the Bible for an explanation for it. And he became famous, and this strongly suggests that his treatments must have worked, and whether it worked through suggestion or something else is kind of irrelevant, really. People felt that they worked, and obviously many people, I would think the majority, must have got better, or they wouldn't have kept going, to the point where you had to have these baths made for multiple
Very true.
people to hold on to. So yeah.
I gotta say, I really enjoy the conversations that we've had over the years, and just getting to know you.
Yeah, likewise.
You're one of my favorite guys to talk to, and I always think of you with the expression that we use in Freemasonry: the first place that we're prepared to be made a Mason is in our hearts, obviously. And it always is fascinating for me to hear you talk about subjects, or even write about them, that are meaningful to you, and also knowing kind of your backstory. And any brother that's gone to angelmillar.com, or any of our listeners or your fans, they'll see there's Angel Millar, the Freemason, but there's also Angel Millar, the hypnotist. And I wanted to talk about how your personal you seeking your thirst for knowledge on this subject, how that has kind of built up to this October issue of the Fraternal Review.
When I was a teenager, 15, I probably would have thought of myself as an atheist before that, but then I became interested in paganism. I don't really know why, to be honest with you. And in maybe not magic, but I bought a book on astral projection and the 4 elements and tried to do it. I didn't really understand it, of course.
Yeah, that's deep, dude. That is a deep book.
Yeah. And then when I was 16, I got a book on pagan rituals. Again, I didn't really understand the context at all. And then when I was 17, I came across a sort of neo-pagan, new age bookshop a few miles from where I lived, and then I ended up spending most of my time at this bookshop, most days of the week, and then being involved in their little circle. And and when I look back, I see really a lot of bad about it, to be quite honest. But looking at the positive, the one really invaluable thing was the guy who was running it, and a very conflicted individual, I think. Nevertheless, did at the time at least give you a sense that no, it's not all shopping malls and McDonald's, and that there's something inherently sort of mystical and magical about England and the natural world. And there were occasions when we would go out into nature, and I remember one time we went out to see some small stone circles, not Stonehenge, but actually lots of stone circles in England, and and to do pagan things. And then I became involved in another much more left-hand path order, which I'm not going to say what it was, although I have discussed it. But I look back now, and I would have had a much more critical view a few years ago. But I look back now, and then sort of the people were very interesting. There were a couple of avant-garde musicians. A few people became authors. I think out of 8 of us, 7 were either avant-garde musicians or authors that time or later, and were quite
It's kind of bohemian sounding almost.
Yeah, well, I think that was from when I was 19 to 20. And so I'd really experienced being around these extremely hardcore individuals in this burgeoning occult order, which is, probably more influential today than it was then, honestly. And it was very intense. I would go and stay over their house, one of their houses or apartments, I should say, and one of them would come over and sleep in, my apartment. And it was very transient. I was always moving around. I was doing rituals all the time. You'd sort of wake up, do meditations, go to work, do reading every spare minute, and then come home and do a ritual. Maybe go out, come back, do meditation. It was really, really, really intense. I mean, it was no joke. But yeah. So and then after that, keeping it as brief as possible. I sort of left that behind. I went to art college. I would stay in a Benedictine monastery every year and practice kung fu. I've been involved in different things through the years. Honestly, most things don't impress me at all.
Wish she'd make that a T-shirt for you.
Yeah, probably. But we can tell from my non-smiling photos on Instagram, probably. But I'm not amused by much. But
it is interesting you telling this story. Like you're almost like a movie character in a way, because now I know you, and it adds so much more to the context. Because
yeah,
I know you're not as we would say, a buttoned up, very serious like that kind of brother, but you
right.
are definitely very, very smart and wise. And I know that when you get to a certain level with wisdom, you're very careful who you reveal that to, because
yeah, that's right.
it gets messy. So I've always felt kind of honored that I've been invited into, your circle of trust, and me coming in gets to bring along, our audience and our listeners get to benefit from this as well. But yeah, you talking about this, like, yeah, you are a very well-rounded individual. You've had a lot of experience.
Yeah, I do. I have a lot of experience. That's why I wrote the book, The Craftsman, Warrior, Magician, because, those three are very much how my life has been shaped, from, studying fine art and design to practicing martial arts and practicing spirituality for over 3 decades. And not to go off too much of a tangent, but when I used to stay in a Benedictine monastery, one of the monks there said to me, "What do you think sin is?" And I said, "I think it's anything that takes you away from your natural path." And he said, "You're exactly right." So he wasn't going to tell me fornication or anything like that. So there are different ways of understanding it, and if you live that life, you're not really concerned about the details. It's more, this idea of sin is more about, you have a natural way of being and you don't want to mess that up. But in regard to getting back to Freemasonry and how we can make the experience better, that's the thing. You want to make it an experience, right? If people are doing VR at home and they go to lodge and do VR, that's not an experience, right? I'm sure that you, me, and pretty much every Freemason, and certainly every serious Freemason, what we like is going in, old buildings, seeing dusty old books or relics that haven't been looked at for 100 years, and something secret or something old or ancient that you would never see on the net, or even if you could see it, you can't hold it. Or you want to go into the chamber of reflection where it's dark and mysterious. That's actually how you make it an experience for people. You don't bring in the outside world, you make it a completely different reality to the outside world. So all this, let's bring in modernity to the lodge. Well, you can do that, but that's the end of Freemasonry, because everybody's got that. So you want to make it as different to that as possible. I mean, whatever you do, right? When you go on vacation, you don't go to a city that's exactly like the one you live in, right? You want to go somewhere really different. If you go and see a movie, that movie probably is nothing like your life. You get excited by, action heroes, or what stimulates us is what's a completely different reality. And if we can submerge people in a different reality for a couple of hours, then that's a real experience that's worth the time and effort to get to lodge. So really, if in terms of practical things, you want to make it an experience. You want to make it serious. So when people go and interview a prospective candidate, you don't want to be joking around or going in jeans. You want to go there in a suit, speak seriously, show that you're thoughtful and intelligent and you know things, and that you're someone worth getting to know, that you understand, whether it's spirituality or philosophy or symbolism, that you come across as an authority. The three brothers that go are authorities. So right from the word go, the experience is, oh wow, these guys are an authority. They know things I want to know. These guys are serious. I want to be around serious guys. But I've been on, especially when I first joined Freemasonry, I've been on these investigation committees, and you get someone joking around. It's not serious. What impression does that give? And so then after that, if you can have a chamber of reflection, or something akin to that, that would be great. That gives somebody a real experience there, make them really reflect on things. People don't, as we were saying earlier, people don't reflect on their mortality. They just drift through life until it's too late. So, that's a great experience. Make the ritual as good as it can be. Give lectures in lodge, and I don't say that those lectures should be always esoteric. In fact, I say that they shouldn't always be esoteric. You can take a movie or a book and discuss it really, really seriously and philosophically, and talk about the meaning of life, and that's worth going to. And, I would say the other thing is you want to get every brother as involved in possible. Not, okay, we need to get them into a chair where they're going to feel pressured to do things they don't want to do. And, they're going to hate it. And then they're going to quit 2 years down the road. You want to get them involved in, can you give a 10-minute lecture on something that really interests you about Freemasonry, some symbol or something? Because then they're going to think about it. They're going to read. They're going to get more out of it, and it's going to help them because they're going to develop their public speaking skills, which is always really good in life in general. And they're going to grow. And if they're in the lodge and they're having an amazing experience you can't get outside of lodge, and they are growing, well, then people will stick around and you'll grow as a fraternity. But all these sort of tricks and gimmicks, that's not going to work. That will just destroy the fraternity. So,
I've never really heard you speak about this before, and I'm so glad that you took the time to share some of these thoughts, because I think of you and I think esoteric, historical research, deep knowledge-based guy, but you offered a lot of practical things that people can put into motion, this year or planning for next year, depending on, where they land on the Masonic calendar. So thank you for sharing that. That was deep.
Hey, you're welcome.
Well, this has been the Craftsman Online podcast, and I'm already thinking when we do an episode on Benedictine monastery, I'm calling this guy.
Sure, yeah.
That's going to do things for this subscriber extra episode of the Craftsman Online podcast. I hope you enjoyed our bonus time with Brother Angel Millar. Make sure to visit him on his website, angelmillar.com. And yes, please pick up a copy of this month's issue of the Fraternal Review magazine. We'd all appreciate it. If you've enjoyed this episode, you can help us out immensely by opening up that browser and giving us a quick review. A few stars, comments, or just a thumbs up goes a long way in helping the Craftsman Online content connect with people who have an interest in Freemasonry, and we thank you in advance. Until next time, let peace and harmony prevail.